There's a lot going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. And quite honestly, most people don't care. They just want to know my phone's got a Wi-Fi signal. And
Yep.
that's fair because they're the customer and that's what they want.
Yeah.
So why not demand it? And then behind the scenes, we're working on ways to make that and improve that process for them. It just takes a lot of time and effort and resources to do it.
Welcome back for a new episode of AEC Perspectives by RS&H. I am your host, Rachel Moore, and today we are going to talk about passenger experience reimagined and how we design airports for the next generation of travelers. First of all, if you're listening to this, even if you've just ever flown and gone through an airport, obviously this will be relevant. But for those of you who are in architecture, engineering, construction, and related to the airport's infrastructure and flight, this is going to be a riveting episode for you, I promise, because we have a great guest on today. But before we get to our guest, let's kind of talk about who this really is for. Airport leaders, operators, professionals in aviation, AEC and related fields. Also, if you're a designer, a planner, engineer, and security and technology leaders, and you're trying to create passenger-centric environments, you want to keep listening to this. Plus, we're going to be giving you some takeaways today that we really hope that you can incorporate into what you do on your day-to-day. We're going to have a guest on who's a thought leader in passenger experience for the aviation industry. We want to help you think proactively about flexibility, scalability, and experience as differentiators over the next decade, because as we all know, things change quick. all the time. And so we want to position you so that you are ready for all that stuff. And we want to connect passenger experience to RS&H's broader values, which is why we're bringing you this episode and why understanding people, behaviors, and needs always leads to better outcomes. So with better outcomes come really great guests. And I'm really excited to introduce today's guest. So we are welcoming Mike Rudzinski, an aviation buildings regional leader for RS&H, to the podcast. Mike is an experienced design professional with more than 30 years in the architectural field with a focus on aviation projects. He's based in Detroit, Michigan, and he brings a distinctive perspective to his work, having served in senior owner representative roles at the Wayne County Airport Authority, fondly known as WCAA, before joining RS&H. His background gives him a deep understanding of how to balance airport operational needs with the passenger experience and how to execute solutions within complex, active airport environments. Mike is also known for his ability to adapt to challenging, high-pressure environments. I mean, that is all about airports, right? For his close coordination with owner stakeholders and federal, state, and local agencies to confirm that projects meet their stated goals. So with all of that, I'm really happy to officially welcome you, Mike, to the podcast. Thanks for joining us on AEC Perspectives.
Thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here. It sounds like I really do know a lot about airports. I mean, that was quite a mouthful you were sharing there, so I appreciate that.
Well, when you've got over 30 years, your bio is going to be a mouthful.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it adds up.
I know, right? It does.
Yeah.
It just kind of grows cumulatively. But yeah, this is why we're having you on today. We obviously want to accomplish a lot and really kind of tie some things together for our listeners. So I am very excited for this discussion today. We're just going to kick right off. And of course, we'll let the discussion kind of unfold as we go, because I bet there's a lot you have to share. So we kind of loaded this episode up as really making sure we're tying in passenger experience into all of this. So let's start there. I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. How have passenger expectations changed or evolved in the last few years to what are the new baseline expectations that airports need to be meeting today?
It's interesting. That's a really good question to ask just as a starter, because the experience has changed dramatically in my lifetime. Just I was thinking about this before the podcast. When I was first getting into an airport, my first time taking a flight, it was to Chicago. From Detroit to Chicago, super easy flight, right? And this is back in I'm going to date myself, but you said 30 years. So this is like early 90s.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah. And so I got to the airport, do the whole thing, and we checked our bags. We got a paper ticket. We walked through the terminal to get to the screen. Back then, the screening areas, they were just basically metal detectors. That was it. Maybe an x-ray machine. I mean, there wasn't much to them.
Yeah.
And then you got to your gate and you found some place to eat a cheap sandwich outside of the airport, be an expensive sandwich in the airport. Because even back then, those sandwiches were pretty expensive and they weren't that great. So you get the sandwich, you sit in your seat, you eat it, and then you board your flight and go through that whole process. It's a totally different dynamic now. Now, you don't need a paper ticket. You can use your phone. You can use your phone to get access to the entire airport. Whether it's you got your boarding pass on there, you can go to, if you got TSA pre-check, it's already on there. You go through the pre-check, you can take your shoes off or anything else, scan your stuff, you're in, you're out. But the scanning is a lot more complicated than it used to be. The experience of going through it is not as complicated. I mean, just from a passenger experience standpoint, okay, you got to walk through, you got the metal detector there, you walk through that, or sometimes you got to put your hands over your head, go through the scanner. You walk through, you get your bag. It can be kind of intimidating to anybody going through there because you feel like you're kind of getting corralled like cattle, right? Just going through the chute. But, from a passenger standpoint, it's a relatively simple process. On the back side of that, the technology to support what's going on there is just amazing what's been happening. It's no longer, hey, the metal detector went off, we got to hand search you or wand you or check your bags, open your bags up, whatever the case may be. Now, if you take a glance and take a peek at what those operators are looking at from the TSA, that's some pretty sophisticated imaging they're getting. And it highlights the different elements that are in there. I don't want to get into too much detail, but if you just take a look at it, there's like color-coded parts, and you're like, wow, that's pretty crazy. They can see the liquids, if there's liquids in there. It's pretty phenomenal. And that holds true when you check your bag. They get the same images. They're just happening at a much faster rate. Those imagers on the backside can scan over 600 bags in an hour.
Wow.
So when you've got a large terminal like Detroit, you can get up to 10,000 people coming through there within an hour. Those bags have to get scanned fast.
Jeez.
So, when you're talking Thanksgiving or the holidays, especially the holidays, the peak seasons, when your bag makes it to that plane, there's a lot that's happened from when you handed that bag off at check-in to when it actually got onto the plane.
Yeah.
You just don't see it.
Yeah.
And the airlines have been spending a lot of money in the technology developing it. Not just, making sure the bag gets to the plane, but knowing exactly where it is in the system at all times. So if they need to hold the flight because the bag's not going to make it, they can hold that flight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just some examples of the technology that's been happening. The other thing that's happened is development of concessions. I mentioned the sandwich earlier, right? Well, now you don't need to go to the airport just to eat a sandwich. You can have a full-blown steak dinner if you want at some airports. It's pretty phenomenal. Or if you Chick-fil-A is your thing, you can just roll up to Chick-fil-A and get a sandwich, But it's also important for these concessionaires to know at the hub airports in particular, there are a lot of connecting passengers.
Yep.
They know they've got to have that service fast. So when somebody's coming, I just went through this about a month ago flying through Salt Lake City. I had to go from one flight to the next. I had 15 minutes to catch my flight. I had to go through, grab something to eat, and get to my gate. As I walked up to the gate, they were calling up my zone for boarding.
Yeah.
So it was like on time, on demand type of stuff. And 30 years ago, you couldn't have done that.
Right.
There's no way. So, and that's just another little thing, right? That's different now than it used to be. The airline clubs, that's another one, right? They're popping up everywhere. Where you got the Visa clubs or, things like that coming up where you can have an elevated experience as a passenger. If you've got a 2-3 hour delay or layover somewhere, you don't have to sit in a hold room. Yeah. You can just go to one of those clubs and just kind of relax and watch TV or take a nap or, get something to eat. So it helps to elevate the experience by reducing the amount of anxiety you have at the airport.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could go in this dynamic.
Oh, I know.
Kinds of stuff, it just to help elevate that experience over the last couple of years. But yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. And it continues to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you had me getting a little bit nostalgic too. And, it all depends on whoever's listening to this, how old you are and what you remember from when you maybe went on your first flight. And obviously that can happen at different ages for everybody, right? But I still remember, I'm going to age myself. I remember a Samsonite commercial where they had like a gorilla like jumping on a suitcase in the back where it's like, oh, that's proving that this is a very sturdy suitcase. But it was y'all, if you see the suitcase these days, it's so old school based on what we have right nowadays. But you're right. The whole experience has shifted. And just think of if you have only ever grown up around one normal airport or maybe a couple that you're used to going to, I'm sure we all have seen how that passenger experience, how our experience has changed as we've gone through And like you said, I mean, it's impacted by all kinds of things, by technology, by geopolitical, societal, security,
Yeah.
everything that's factoring in there. But I think you did such a great job of just kind of laying out like what today's baseline expectations are. I expect, if I'm going to an airport, and maybe more than one, you've got at least the one you're going to and the one you're going to end up in. You have those expectations of how security is going to work, how fast it's going to work, if you got TSA pre-check or not. So security, can I eat or drink if I'm there? Do I have a lounge? Do I have points
Mhm.
or membership and stuff? So thank you so much too, because this really does highlight all the different ways that people, even if you're not partaking of that stuff, you're walking through it and you expect to see it around you.
Yeah.
So with that, I would like to ask, so if we're thinking about that passenger that's walking through the airport, and seeing and possibly participating in all the experiences that an airport provides, that's a persona, right? We're kind of thinking of
Right.
that avatar of a person. How are those passenger personas being rethought or expanded in today's airport designs? Like, how is that being considered as people design airports?
Well, that's very important because those personas can be varied depending which airport you're in. Like
Yeah.
different parts of the country, different types of travelers, different types of needs, different size airports too have different personas that go through there as well. So some airports, they could be in a college town, so you're gonna have more students kind of coming in and out of there. Other airports, they have a lot of golfers that like Tucson. They have a lot of golfers that like to come through certain parts of the year. So they kind of tailor what those specific needs are for those passengers for those specific airports. So it's not a one size fits all for every airport because there's a saying that goes around the airport industry a lot. It's kind of cliche, but it still holds true. Is you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport because
Yeah.
every airport is going to be different with whatever they're doing. So as far as personas go, I mentioned earlier, let's say, for instance, me, I'm a business traveler, right? I have specific needs that I have. I want to get there, get to my flight, get to where I need to go. I'm going to be able to log in on Wi-Fi, catch up on emails, do that sort of thing, just so I can be productive during my time at the airport. But let's say, for instance, you're just somebody who's vacationing. You want to take a nice trip somewhere, and you've got the different passengers. You got your passengers at like their upgraded flight class. I don't want to say business class or first class. It's all changing by airline depending on time.
Totally.
But yeah, they have one experience they're expecting, but then you've got somebody who's on a budget and traveling. They've got a different experience. But at some point, those experiences are merging when they go through this terminal facility. So how do you differentiate who needs what? Because if I'm on a budget, hey, Chick-fil-A is just fine by me, or McDonald's, or whomever, wherever you want to go to eat. But if I'm spending some money and it's like a once in a lifetime trip, I want to have a really nice meal, stay in a club or lounge, just really relax and embrace the whole experience of it. So there's that type of persona. You've got the persona of somebody who may be older or elderly. They have different needs. They may need to have assistance, at the gate, getting on and off the aircraft, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you've got people with other special needs that need to be addressed as well. They don't want to feel excluded. They want to feel it's part of the whole experience. So you can't just call them out and say, hey, you have this specific need. We're going to do. No, they want to feel like I'm part of society, not just I'm a solo person here. So, but you got to be very sensitive to that as well. Identifying those needs specifically, it can vary. A lot of airports, what they'll do is they actually take surveys of the types of passengers that are there and what they expect, what they consider is an elevated experience, what they would like to see in an airport, that sort of thing. You take that feedback and then you can tailor it based on what's being provided, saying, okay, well, maybe we can do this instead or have this service or maybe focus on this type of service. For example, Grand Rapids Airport, they actually put in a facility there where if people who are sensitive to overstimulation,
Yeah.
what they can do is you can step through like a virtual airport where you can walk through like what it's like to be screened, go down the gate and get into the aircraft without having to go through the whole process. So it kind of acclimates them a little bit to what to experience. It's people who are traveling with small kids. That's a great thing for them as well because you don't know what special. I'm the father of 3, and kids have little things that they'll latch onto and focus on. And knowing that ahead of time before you get to the airport is a lot easier to make it for the parents to travel.
Yeah.
So you start to identify, it's not just persona, it's what's the need, right? Based on the type of passenger coming through here and what their specific issues are, right?
Yeah.
But you can't like categorize them either. So they really get spun over.
Yeah, and you did such a good job too, because when you focus on what is the need of the person, And obviously, need can feel very subjective. I'm going to use my own family as an example. We recently traveled. It was 3 of us. We have 4 of us. Our other kid went on a road trip. He was not into the flight thing for this
Yeah.
particular trip. But I've got me. I am taking my laptop, so I want Wi-Fi because I know I've got to connect with work, but I'm also going on a vacation. But then I've got my daughter who's a teenager, but she also has some physical needs. And so
Right.
we had to kind of look at like accessibility stuff, like
Right.
what can supports are there to help her get to the gate without feeling exhausted or pain and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Then I've got my husband. He's an adult. He's not working. He's just there for the good times. And
Yeah.
so you've got 3 different personas right there in one family. And that's, again, just an example. And that's a family. You can even get the same thing with a group of business people who are going
Mhm.
through the airport. They're all going to have different needs. And so I
Right.
really love that you zeroed in on that because that helps shape it. It's not labeling people. Like you said, it's not categorizing. It's literally just saying, you've got to acknowledge there are different needs that each of these personas has. How is this airport design that we're implementing going to meet all of those needs fairly equally without singling anyone out, but just being available there? The next time any of us go through an airport again casually, but also for the people listening who, hey, this is what we do and we design this kind of stuff, it really does. I know I'm going to be like kind of like looking around and really assessing it a bit more, being like, wow, look at all the ways that this is meeting my needs as well as people who are not necessarily like me. You touched earlier too, because I feel like we have to talk about technology a bit as well, because obviously you even mentioned a couple of ways too, and just talking about personas, technology plays a role, and also data. You talked about surveys. So I want to kind of dig deeper into that. What role do technology and operational data play in shaping that passenger journey from, say, security all the way through boarding? Like, how are we using
Mhm.
tech and data to shape the journey?
So this is a multi-layered response because there's all kinds of different users and operators in an airport that use data for different reasons. Could be the same data, but different reasons. One specific example is whenever the airlines they know there's going to be a big push coming out. We'll use Thanksgiving. That's a pretty obvious one where passengers coming through. Anybody who's traveled during Thanksgiving holidays knows airports are very busy. Now, if they think that's how airports are all the time, that's not true. It's just during that time. Sometimes people kind of latch onto that, but certainly there are busy times. That's one of them. So let's say, for instance, the airlines have an idea of how many passengers are going to be boarding in for that week. And I've sat in on these meetings. They'll sit down with the TSA folks and say, hey, we've got X amount of passengers that could be coming up. We need to be sure they're getting screened on time so we can make the flights. So, but different reasons, same data. So the airlines want to know, hey, we've got X amount of passengers filling the planes. TSA needs to know, hey, we've got so many people we need to screen to get into the terminals. So they do a lot of that planning actually well ahead of those travel seasons. That way, when it does hit, they're prepared. Having those passenger numbers helps the concessionaires as well, because now they know, hey, we've got to buy more inventory, we've got to have more servers, we've got to have more people available to meet that demand. So again, same data, different reason. That's just one example of the technology used. I mentioned screening earlier. You have passenger screening and the technology is involved with screening the bags and making sure they track the bags. What's important about that, and what a lot of people may not understand, is with those bags being scanned and knowing where they're at in the system, it allows whoever the station manager or the manager for that airline to know where the bag is and hold the flights. I mentioned that earlier. What I didn't mention was if a certain amount of bags don't make the flight, it impacts the score of the manager. So that's a huge priority for them to get those bags onto the plane. And there's penalties involved too if those bags don't make it. So let's say, for instance, my bag gets lost for whatever reason. There's penalties the airlines could incur if they can't find that bag to replace all my property. If they do find the bag, they still have to pay somebody to deliver the bag wherever I am. So that's a cost. They don't want to incur that cost if they don't have to. I wouldn't. Having that technology available to know, okay, if we wait 30 more seconds, that bag will get to the flight. Now they've just saved themselves all that grief of figuring out how to get the bag to the person. But that's not always true, but it's a tool. It's available to them to make sure that the bags are there and the passenger's experience is as good as could be.
Yeah.
Gosh, there's other thing. I kind of teased dynamic signage earlier. So what's cool about that is years ago, and you may have experienced this on international flights, You go through area of the terminal and you'll see a sign and it has the same message, but in 5 different languages, right? And it gets kind of overwhelming because you're just trying to navigate where you want to go. And you see these signs, where do I go? What do I do? And you're trying to find the English version or whatever language you speak. And then finally, you kind of navigate through that. Well, with dynamic signage, what airports can do now is instead of having 5 different languages, they can just flash up the language of the people that are actually on that flight. Because they have the passenger metrics of who's traveling to where. So let's say they know people that are coming back. I'll give you an example. Coming back from, let's say you're flying back from France, and they know there's people that have addresses in the United States and the people that have addresses in France. That's some of the metrics the airlines have. So they can customize that signage.
Wow.
Germany, or if they say somebody's flying through France and they're from Germany, they'll add a little German blurb in there. But honestly, it's capable of doing that. And some airports are actually doing it, and at least from an international standpoint. Dynamic signage can also help with just finding your gate. Flying to Detroit, 'cause Delta Hub, and what I find very convenient is if I'm connecting to a flight, once I get off of that plane, I can look up at a monitor and say, oh, I'm connected to such and such a gate. And I can walk right over to it.
Wow.
Because the information's right there in the holder. And then I know I can turn left or right. So that's just another thing. And it's not just technology, but the design of the terminal is helpful as well. A lot of fans of McNamara Terminal out there. I'm one of them. Just because you get off the gate, you turn left, you turn right. That's it. You don't go, I have to turn left and right, then left and go here and go. Not well, unless you're going through the tunnel, but that's a whole other experience. But generally speaking, you turn left, you turn right. Salt Lake City, same thing. You turn left, you turn right, or you find the tunnel. LA, not so much. Left or right, over here, over there. It can get chaotic there at times, especially when there's passengers all over the place, just trying to find where you need to go. But certainly having that design in the layout of the terminal is not necessarily a technological issue, but it certainly helps with navigation for the passengers using it.
Yeah, for real. This is all so fascinating. And you're making me think, even just as a casual traveler, like I've imagined, recently just sitting on a plane, and sometimes you're like, why aren't we moving? Why aren't we taking off yet? Now I go like, well, actually, they're giving that another 30 seconds for some bags to get on,
right?
Because there's scoring going on, and they want to make sure these bags, maybe it's my bag, I don't know, and
exactly.
It's not like just someone on a whim being like, we're not going to take off yet. And there's just all these moving parts and pieces that are really interesting to know about. I want to bring up too, because you raised this with me as well. The first time I experienced this was a month ago. I can't remember what airport we were in, but I did get a little alert pop up on my whatever airline app it was. It says, hey, if you like, we can activate or turn on this thing that we will tell you. We know what gate you're supposed to go to. If you're going in the wrong direction, we'll buzz you. We'll alert you. And that blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh,
Isn't that cool?
And I think it was at our home airport. I'm like, I know where I'm going, but that would be so helpful. It's like having Google Maps for the airport on your phone.
Right. Yeah.
To say, hey, we want to make sure you're not turned around and heading the wrong way, and you're able. But the technology is astounding, and how it is impacting and hopefully improving, right, the experience of passengers. We're going to start future casting here a little bit too, because this is all mind-blowing for right now. Obviously, tech's just going to keep happening. I mean, gosh, AI's out there too, and it's all this stuff. But let's look ahead, Mike. Look with me. Like, if we're going to cast our little crystal ball forward 5 to 10 years, when you picture the passenger experience in airports in 5 or 10 years, what do you see? And then more specifically, this is for our listeners, how should airports and their designers start preparing for that now? What is that going to look like?
Well, as you're speaking, I thought of another technology that's being tested in Detroit right now.
Yeah?
Well, it's a virtual experience that Delta Airlines put into place. So for anybody who's traveling through Detroit Metro Airport, McNamara Terminal specifically on a Delta flight, if you're checking in from Detroit, or if you happen to be flying through, it's in the area what's called the Central Link. And it's close to where the fountain is. There's the tram that goes through there, the end of the terminal. And the other side, if you're standing at the fountain, on the other side of the tram, if you look, they call it the virtual experience. So there's a counter there. It's kind of a script counter with a couple scanners there. Yeah. So what you can do as a passenger is you can scan your boarding pass. If you have a QR code, scan it, you stand in a spot, it will customize the message on the LED monitor to say, welcome, Mike Rudzinski, to your flight. Your gate number is blah, blah, blah. But if I'm standing 2 feet to the left, no one can see that. It's just from the angle I'm looking at it. And 3 different people can see it, 3 different messages depending what angle they're looking at that sign.
Whoa. I mean,
It's
so
pretty
helpful.
cool.
Oh my God. Because
Yeah.
it's like having, like if there was an attendant or, a
Mhm.
staff person, instead of asking them, at least you're just getting that custom message, be like, I got
Right.
you. Here's where you're supposed to go. By the way, welcome. Welcome to the airport.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to just go to the flight information displays, the FITS monitors anyways, just look up
Yeah.
flight. It's just what I'm familiar with. But yeah, it's pretty cool technology. They're just
Yeah.
still testing it out. It's not rolled out anywhere yet, but it's out there. As they develop this more and more, it's going to get to the point where I'm walking by a sign and I can see a message on a sign that's just for me,
Yeah.
right? But somebody sitting next to me or behind me or in front of me, they're not going to see the same message.
That's
So
wild. I mean,
it's just, isn't that crazy?
it is. And that's happening right now. I mean, gosh. And then, yeah, keep going. Like, what about in 5 to 10 years? What are we looking at? What do we think's going to happen?
Right. Yeah. And honestly, with all this technology, you're going to need infrastructure for it, right? So
Yeah.
not just the monitors themselves, because the monitors, they switch out. I mean, with the technology increases happening, I mean, a TV you buy 10 years ago is, they're not the smart TVs like they are now, right? Or even
Right.
consumer kind of stuff. But same thing in airports. So you need to have that infrastructure in order to accommodate all the wiring and the signals and everything else for all this data to be exchanged. So having that backbone to provide just the pathways for the network will be extremely helpful in the future. Power, there's always a demand for power, whether it's going to continue to increase because a lot of airlines are going into electric powered ground vehicles, right?
Yeah.
For luggage carts and fuel trucks and whatever's on that ramp, they're going to want to make the electric type of vehicle. But that takes a lot more power and a lot more distribution. And there's a lot going on behind that because it's great that the technology's there. You could just plug your car in and charge it, but you need to have the wiring to support plugging in the chargers of 20, 30, 40 cars.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's plugged in too many Christmas light bulbs on that extension cord, it can overheat. And if that cord's not big enough, so you got to make sure the wires are big enough going to where those charging stations or whatever that electrical demand is. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see. And quite honestly, most people don't care. They just want to know my phone's got a Wi-Fi signal. And that's fair because they're the customer and that's what they want.
Yeah.
So why not demand it? And then behind the scenes, they're working on ways to make that and improve that process for them. It just takes a lot of time and effort and resources to do it
Yeah. For real.
because you're working at scale. You're not just working for the individual.
Well, and I would imagine too, because these are airports, you don't want to shut the airport down. You really can't,
Right.
So it's this all kind of piecemeal stuff. To me, it's like road construction, right? Like the roads have to stay open at least
Yep.
a little bit, so some traffic can get through, but even while you're working on stuff on the side and then just kind of plan how and when you're working on that. And that does take some time, 5 to 10
Yeah.
years for some of this stuff to unfold, right?
I've used the analogy of it's like trying to change the oil in your car by going 30 miles an hour. You have
Yeah.
to keep moving, but the work's got to get done.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I'm excited. I mean, and this is great too, because it is prepping, all of our listeners too, who work in airport design, just kind of like, always being forward thinking. I know too, we've had guests on the podcast as well who specifically, orchestrate what's going on at specific airports. And yeah, just having their eyes, they're always looking at what's next. And again, this has been the common thread through these questions we've been talking through. The passenger experience, because the passengers aren't going to, if they're having a bad experience, they're going to be like, I won't do air travel anymore. I'll drive or take a train or whatever other
Right.
means they can that's available to them. But yeah, you want them to keep coming back and saying, no,
Mhm.
we've got you for this thing that you need to do, whether it's, personal or professional. We've
Right.
got this experience for you, right? It's really important.
There's value to their money, right? They expect to have a certain level of service for the amount of money they're spending.
Yeah.
And all too often, people tend to think, well, I shouldn't have to pay X amount of money for this ticket to wear. And I feel the same way sometimes too.
Yeah.
But we all do.
Yeah.
But certainly when we buy that ticket or that service, wherever else, we want to make sure we're getting the best value possible for that. My plane ticket means something. It's not just my travel from here to there and back. It's, hey, what was the gate holdering like? Was it too noisy there? Could I focus? Could I get a Wi-Fi signal? Could I put my cup in a cup holder in the seat? Right?
Yeah.
Because how often I've done it. I put my cup down on the floor because there's nowhere else to put it. Right. And then you
Right.
get up for boarding and you leave your coffee behind because you forgot it because it was on the floor. And then somebody's got to come by and clean that mess up. So, just little things like that. And it goes beyond technology. It's just the simple little things. If you don't address those, all the other stuff doesn't really work. But that's all part of that value that the customer's expecting when they buy that ticket, right?
That's
they
right.
Clean the airport. They don't want to see any critters running around, getting in whatever. They want to have just a nice experience because travel is stressful. There's no question.
That's right.
So I want to be the least amount of stress as possible when I'm traveling.
Yeah. I love that you brought up that stuff too. Like for me, one of my creature comforts that I've loved seeing at airports lately is like, again, I'm typically bringing my laptop with me. I love seeing those like standing working kind of benches or desks where I can stand. There might be a stool there if I want to sit, but I could just, because we're all about to sit on a plane for at least a
Right.
couple hours. And I
Yep.
love that option that I'm like, I can sit there, I could plug in if I need to, but I can stand and work before I get on this plane. And just that little additive is makes my experience better. And everybody's got their thing. As we pointed out, every passenger has those little creature comforts or necessities. And we look at them again as needs. Are you able to deliver that for them in your airport design? And Mike, I know we're kind of coming to wrap up here too. And of course, we're tying this all in. You are with RS&H, and this is something on your brain all the time. And this is something RS&H does. And we talked about you've been in the industry for 30 years of experience. You and I talked about things we remember from way back in the day that's decades old from airlines and airport experience. Well, speaking of decades, RS&H is celebrating our 85th anniversary this year, so several decades and a half. So let's think in context of that. We're talking 85 years.
Okay.
Now, obviously, that pretty much encompasses airport design for a long time. Mike, what lessons from past airport design efforts are still influencing how we think about passenger experience today?
Well, given that I've been with RS&H for about almost 4 of those 85 years, I can't attest to too much of the history of RS&H at the airport design, but I can certainly talk from the customer standpoint, from the airline operator standpoint, at least for over the last 20 plus 25 years. A lot of changes have happened. I mean, and they continue to happen. All too often when these airports get built, they're built for a specific market at the time they're made. So, for instance, back when a lot of airports were built back in the 50s and 60s, they incorporated the air traffic control tower inside of the building, which was great back then. But now those operations are completely different, and there's a need to separate those. But it's difficult because they're so integrated and tied in. You kind of, for lack of a better term, you're almost splitting the baby, right? Because you got to have this function here, this function there. But the capital to be able to do that type of work, right? And a lot of these smaller airports, they just can't afford it. So they're limited when it comes to that type of a design. But certainly when we find clients like that, we try to come up with more meaningful solutions to say, hey, look, here's how we can kind of segregate or separate some of these functions so you're not necessarily running into them all the time. They can start operating more independently of each other. Even though they're critical to each other, they still have to operate almost independently. Yeah. So for instance, an air traffic control tower, they've got different needs because they've got their employees there. It's a very stressful job working there. Very stressful job. And the bigger the airport, the more stress there is. Yeah. So they need to have certain amenities so they can be able to function and do their job. Mixing them up with the passengers, that more stressful environment is not the best place for them. So having those functions separate certainly will help alleviate some of those issues, just from a psychological standpoint. Yeah. But as far as terminal design, there's a lot of focus that's been being put more on right-sizing terminals for the needs of that airport, because you want to make sure whenever that terminal is built and constructed, it's the right size for the passengers using it, as well as the operational cost. If it's too big, now this airport's paying more to keep the lights on, to keep it heated, to keep it air conditioned for spaces that aren't even being utilized, which is going to increase the rental rates for the airlines or the operators at the airport. If there's not enough passengers revenue to support that space, the airport's not going to make revenue. It's just simple math. So during my time in RS&H, I found there's a concerted effort to identify what those spaces should be, how large they really should be, not just for the passengers, the airlines, but what we need for the infrastructure, for power, for networking, the mechanical systems, baggage handling systems have to fit in there somewhere. So making that more concerted effort to right size those spaces, so you're making sure you're addressing the needs and making it the perfect size for that airport, keeping in mind they may have future expansion that they need to do. So, if there's ways to keep some of those core areas slightly larger to accommodate for future growth, as well as having room on either end of the airport to expand it as needed. Little things like that certainly makes a big difference. Another thing that we're running into is because some of these airports are very limited on their space, we're trying to put more people in the space. Certain airport that was designed for a fairly large airport, not a hub, but a medium airport, designed for commercial regional jets, CRJs, RJ flights. They hold, 50, 70 people on a plane, right? The hold rooms are sized for that size plane as well. Well, now that aircraft's being phased out by a lot of the airlines. They're almost not used. And now they're favoring the larger A319, A321, 737s for flights. Well, now you're talking 150 to 200 people, depending on what type of aircraft is in there. Well, those hold rooms are sized for 50 to 70 people.
Yeah.
So when you're waiting for that flight, there's nowhere to sit.
Yep.
So you're kind of backed up, and there's like concessions all around you and restaurants, but you really still can't sit there waiting for a flight unless you're having a meal. So everything kind of gets jammed up in there.
Yep.
And it's not the fault of anyone. It's just that the market changed and the demand increased. So finding more creative ways of using the space and better utilizing that space without having to spend millions, some instances billions of dollars to improve that facility to meet the passenger needs, that's a huge burden for these airports. So if we can come up with more creative ways of using the space while not severely impacting revenue from the concession side and the airline side, that's really going to be a key element in moving forward with some of these airports until they can have the capital to expand those terminals or those amenities that they need.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky. And then that cascades back into the checkpoints, because now the checkpoints, they need to be bigger. So where do you go? Because there's no space. It's pretty amazing how integrated everything is in the airport from the front door to the wall of that flight, because there's so many different things along the way that people don't realize what goes on behind the scenes to make sure they're optimizing that experience. So that's just one thing. We've looked at seating. We talked a little bit about seating. There was a study done at Detroit while I was still working there to determine how many seats actually get used.
Yeah.
And it still holds true now, even though the study was done over 10 years ago. And for anybody who's traveling, something to keep a watch out for. So you go to a hold room, you go to sit down. Let's say you get there an hour before your flight, right? So you kind of settle in, sit down, you got your coffee or your drink or whatever. You kind of listen to a podcast, kind of chilling out. The thing that we found is people tend to gravitate more towards wherever there's power, where they can plug in their device, or they go towards the windows closer to where the boarding gate is, right? So then let's start kind of fanning out from there. What we also found out is people don't sit next to each other.
That's right.
Whether anywhere. You got to have at least 2 seats, right? 2 seats before the next person, right?
True.
Which is weird because now the person, whoever's coming up to sit, there's like, do I sit next to that person or that person? There's a whole psychology of that. Sometimes they'll just stand like, I'm just going to stand, right?
Yep.
Unless there's a flight delay and now you've got more people getting into that hole, and then all of a sudden you're starting to make more friends because you don't want to stand for 2 hours.
That's right.
So having more thought about, well, what's a better way of implementing the seating here? Do we have to have seats the way this is set up? Do we have to have X amount of seats for this gate based on the formula? Or can we do enhancements to this area to improve the amenities? So maybe instead of having the extra seat next to you that nobody's going to sit in, you put a little table there.
Yeah.
Or a little charging station or some little other amenity to help improve that. Or you can take your lunch and set it down there, right? Instead of on the floor. Or you're trying to fumble around because, for anybody who's trying to connect the flight in a full gate hold room, you're balancing your lunch on your lap, just trying to get it down before you're called to board that flight. So things like that, just having more perspectives from the passenger's point of view is really where things should be going. And they are going. And a lot of airports are doing this. They're being very thoughtful for the passenger experience. It just takes time and it takes resources in order to address that. And as they start addressing those certain passenger needs, more needs come up or things change or something comes up. So it's just a continuous improvement process that airports are dealing with. I don't see it ending, quite honestly, because as society develops, so do airports.
Well, and it won't end, and hopefully it won't, because you have plenty of work to do and will for the indefinite foreseeable future. But this has been fascinating, seriously. And again, I'm speaking as somebody who is, I travel. I do not work on airport design, but our listeners do. And so this has been so helpful, really shedding light on just like all the things that our, AEC folks need to be thinking about when they're talking about airport infrastructure and planning and design and tech and everything like that. where we have been, where we are now, and where we're going to wind up going in the future. And so, Mike, this has been so insightful, and I really just appreciate, your time and just expanding on all this stuff. And you're making me think now I'm going to appreciate my home airport even more now when I see some of these things, being like, oh, that's why that's there. Or I so appreciate that's there. Even if I don't use that, somebody's gonna, and
Right.
so this is so great. And of course, we'll all be thinking of that as we go on our next travels. But Mike, thank you so much for taking some time today
Well,
to give us your insights and your experience on airport design and passenger experience.
thanks for having me. I enjoy this. It's a lot of fun.
No, it's great. We'll have to have you back on in another 5 to 10 years because we're going to talk about whatever the latest stuff is. But this is great. So again, everybody, just thank you so much for listening and watching our episode here about passenger experience reimagined and how we design airports for the next generation of travelers. Of course, this podcast, as always, is brought to you by RS&H. So as Mike is one of the experts there that helps with all this kind of stuff, and as you mentioned, help clients of all sizes with thinking through this stuff, we're always a resource for whatever your needs are in that area. So please do reach out to RS&H and make sure you keep listening to the podcast. There's inevitably going to be an episode that touches on what you're working on. So with that, we bid everyone a fond farewell, and we'll see you on the next episode of AEC Perspectives.